Welcome everyone to the City of Hermantown Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for July 18th, 2023. It's currently 7 p.m. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Peterson is absent. Colquist is here. Commissioner Olet.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Wenzloff.
Here.
Commissioner Simmons.
Here.
Commissioner Thomasoni is absent, and Councilor Geisler.
Here.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 2, approval of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
Clark with the motion to approve.
Clark with the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Allow with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. On to agenda item number 3, approval of tonight's minutes for June 21st, 2023. Can I get a motion?
Simmons with a motion to approve.
Simmons with the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Sloff second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. Number 4 this evening is public discussion. Is anyone here to speak on anything that isn't on tonight's agenda? No one's here to speak on anything. We'll move on to number 5. Public hearings. Number 5A, an application by Doug Golden for a special use permit for the construction of a 1,600 square foot accessory structure. The property is located at 5491 West Arrowhead Road and is located in R3 residential zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us tonight on this?
Great, thank you very much. If I could ask Mr. Wickland if he's able to bring up the location map associated with this. Thank you. So what we're looking at this evening, it's a special use permit for an accessory structure, and that's termed something as garage structure type that's greater than 1,200 square feet. This property is located at 5491 West Arrowhead, and it's an R3 zoning district. As you can see on the map here, property lies just north of West Arrowhead Road and approximately about 1/8 of a mile west of Dahl Road. It's essentially right across from Lindahl Road for the most part. As I mentioned, this is a 2.5 acre lot. It's an R3 zoning. What the applicant is looking for this evening is a concurrence from the planning and zoning for a special use permit to construct a 40 by 40 foot accessory structure, which is a total of 1,600 square feet. These are allowed with a special use permit in the R3 zoning district, provided they meet some different items associated with it, i.e. setbacks, lot coverage, etc. that way. So in this case, the lot coverage or the zoning district allows up to 35% lot coverage with buildings. This proposal brings the current lot coverage up to 5.2%, so they'd be well under. The setbacks that are proposed as part of this building construction, you either meet or exceed the city requirements for the accessory structure. That'd be the front, side yard, and the rear yard setbacks that way. Joe, if you could scroll a little bit more to show one of the site plan associated with this. Right now on the property, there's the existing home that's located closer to Arrowhead Road with an existing garage behind that. Applicants proposing to continue that driveway up to the essentially northeast for that proposed garage building there. And if scroll one more, please, Joe. This is an example of what the existing building is on site right now. And the applicant proposes to match that same type of look. That steel siding, steel roof associated with that. And as part of this, there's no business activity as part of this proposal. And as part of it, that's one of the conditions of approval for the special use permit. This would require that this goes to the the city council meeting as well on August 7th for final approval by them. So what we're looking for this evening is a recommendation from planning and zoning for this application to go forward to city council.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric. Commission members, any comments, questions?
I have none for this. No.
No questions.
Okay. Not hearing. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak at all? Or did Eric do a fine job? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll go ahead then and open up the floor at 7:05 for public discussion. Is anyone here to speak on this matter? All right, not hearing anything. We'll go ahead and close that at 7:05. Commission members, any last thoughts? Okay, I look for a motion on agenda item 5A.
Simmons with a motion to approve 5A as stated.
Simmons with the motion. Can I get a second?
Olet second.
Olet second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, for agenda item 5B, I am going to be abstaining, so I'm going to pass this off to Commissioner Clark. You want to take it from here?
Agenda item 5B this evening is an application by Brett Colquist Trucking for a commercial industrial development permit for the construction of a 5,000 square foot district office building with associated site and stormwater improvements. The property is located at 498X Lightning Drive and is located in a BLM Business and Light Manufacturing Zone District. Eric.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wickland, once again, if you can provide the map, thank you. So right now, this property is being proposed to be cut out of an existing city-owned parcel. Right now, this is about a 20-acre parcel that exists within our industrial park that we have. This proposed 4-acre parcel, as you can see, is essentially in the southeast quadrant of Lightning Drive and Getchell Drive. The applicant, Mr. Colquist, has contacted the city about the ability to obtain this 4-acre parcel through the business subsidy program through our Economic Development Association. This would be the third building within our industrial park that essentially fell under that. So as part of what we're looking for this evening is the commercial industrial development permit approval for this proposed use and building. So as I mentioned, this is a 4-acre site that's shown here on the screen. It's zoned business light manufacturing. Joel, if you can scroll up to the next site plan, please. What the applicant is proposing is the construction of a 5,000 square foot building. Right now on this property, it's interesting located that there's an existing overhead power lines associated with this, and there's wetlands generally in the southern and eastern portion of the property. So this particular building and this use fits in quite well with the available upland that is there right now. So as I mentioned, he's looking for a 5,000 square foot building to relocate his existing trucking company to. As part of the not only the heater requirements, but also the CIDP, the applicant will be creating a paved surface to access this building for this. So the site has been looked at from a technical evaluation panel. That's the wetlands. It has received approval. The applicant has the ability to impact up to 5,800 square feet of wetlands associated with the site under the de minimis exemption. And they fall well under that. So it works quite well that way. The building will be hooked into city sewer and water. So it'll be covered that way. And then the building setbacks, once again, either meet or exceed our requirements that we have for front, rear, and side yard setbacks that way. In the BLM district, we allow up to 35% of lot coverage. We're approximately at 2.9%. The building would be approximately 25 feet in height. Mr. Wickland, if you could scroll through a couple more slides. And if you have the ability, thank you. So the applicant is as a metal sided building, but as part of the heater requirements is going to be constructing a 3-foot basically brick or stone wainscot along the front of the building that way. We'll also have a metal roof associated with that to shed the water. The applicant has engaged JPJ engineers that have prepared the basically preliminary level site engineering and grading plans associated with this, as well as stormwater. Staff had the opportunity to meet with JPJ and the applicant further this morning, just to discuss a little bit more final site details as this would move forward into a final design at that point. Trash service would be located in the interior of the building. And as I mentioned, it does meet or exceed all the building setbacks associated with this zoning district.
Thank you, Eric. Commission members, any questions or comments on agenda item 5B this evening? I just had one clarification for Eric. With CIDP, we are the approving board for that, correct?
That is correct. Yes, this is one of the things that planning and zoning does have direct approval of.
Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing, I will open up the floor at 7:10 PM for anyone that in the audience that would like to speak on agenda item 5B this evening. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:10 PM on agenda item 5B. Any remaining questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion on item 5B.
I'd move to approve 5B. Willett?
Winslow, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. With that, I will pass it back for you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5C, review of proposed tax increment financing district 1 and 2, the greenhouse. Eric, what do you have for us tonight on this?
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit on my conversation with Mr. Clark. What before us this evening is one of the rare, basically opportunities for the Planning and Zoning Commission to actually approve a resolution. Traditionally, resolutions are approved by the city council, but in the event when we start speaking about development districts and tax increment finance districts, we do have an intermediate step with the planning and zoning that they actually would look at a resolution. So before us this evening is going to be one resolution that covers basically two items associated with it. The first one is the expansion of the development district associated with the city. And Joe, maybe if you can, thank you, we have the map. It's expansion of the existing development district within the city. The second thing is to approve the ability to create a TIF district or tax increment finance district on the 26-acre property that's known as currently as the Ingwalls project. On the map on the screen right here, this shows how the development district is proposed to be expanded. Right now, the existing development district lies within Uggstead Road to Haynes Road, and it follows generally the Anderson Road alignment to the northerly part of the city. That's how it exists today. That was created in 1993. What we're looking this evening is once again that expansion of that development district to essentially still keep Uggstead Road primarily as the western boundary, continue obviously Haynes on the eastern boundary, expand the district down to the south all the way to our southerly borders, and then to expand the district over into sections 4 and 5, which run along Highway 53. So within this development district, this allows for the creation of a tax increment finance or TIF district on any of the parcels within this boundary, once again, assuming it meets the TIF requirements and thresholds for this. So as I mentioned, we're looking for approval of two items under one single resolution. The rationale behind the expanded development district is twofold. The city has been in discussions with the property owner of the Arrowhead refinery site, which essentially exists at the intersection of Highway 53 and the Lake Bypass. That's once again has been a site that's been vacant for a number of years. It's a delisted Superfund site. The city, as well as the property owners, we're currently working what's called an alternate urban wide area review. It's an environmental scoping document that help answer questions associated with this property. So it moves more towards a development ready parcel. It's not going to be shovel ready, but at least the environmental questions associated with that property would be answered. So the expansion of this development district, once again, including sections 4 and 5, that's once again in the northeast corner of our city, that could allow for a potential future TIF district associated with this particular site. As part of in the creation of a TIF district, the city engages LHB out of the Twin Cities to review properties, review the existing characteristics, building, soil conditions, etc., to see if it meets the requirements of the creation of a TIF district. Currently in this site right now with the Hermantown Business Park, the former Arrowhead refinery site, LHB is wrapping up their investigation. They're looking at the potential maybe of a redevelopment TIF district or the potential of a soils TIF district. Those are two different routes to go with that. The rationale for the expansion down to the south is to basically address the Ingwalls property that's located at Hermantown Road and essentially Okerstrom Road and Haynes Road between there. That property, the city has been contacted by a local developer for the potential development of that property as a residential housing site. At this stage, there are no applications for that. The applicant does not currently own that site. It is still owned by Rod Celine of Ingwalls. So what we're just looking at this evening is the ability to create a TIF district to aid in the redevelopment of this site. LHB has looked at this particular property and deemed that, yes, it does meet the criteria associated with the redevelopment TIF district. There's bladed buildings on this property. And by being able to create a TIF district on this, it starts to bring another source of financing for the potential development of this property. In this case, once again, it could be for potentially PNR, but that is not the case at this point. We're just trying to make this site as attractive as possible for a future developer at some date that way. So as part of this as well, staff looked at, does the redevelopment of this site basically meet the comprehensive plans? And the city envisions this property as a residential development that essentially clusters the homes or buildings in a narrower, tighter time building envelope in order to protect Keene Creek as well as the city trail that runs adjacent to the creek at this point. Once again, assuming that we have the ability to create a TIF district, that opens up other avenues for financing for this property should and when it be developed that way. Once again, this housing based project would be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. And then we look at it as well that of residential development in this area, it provides needed housing that we have for our city that way, and as well as it protects aspects of the Keene Creek and protects natural environment associated with that. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any further questions. As I mentioned, we're looking at two actions on one resolution. The first being the expansion of the development district, the second being the ability to create a TIF district on the Ingwalls property. Once again, should this property develop in the future, any application would come to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a CIDP. At that point, we would look at the particulars of that particular project or submission at that point.
Eric, just one question. You state that it meets the comprehensive plan. Is that the new comprehensive plan we're working on as well, or just the one from 2001?
Since the new one is not obviously enacted yet, we're just looking at the existing as it is. In this area, it identifies for residential development and the protection of natural resources. So when this site, as well as many others potentially in the city, comes forward for the comprehensive plan, there'll be some more additional guiding information associated with it. Does that help answer your question?
Well, I would hate to approve this and then have it not fit with the new comprehensive plan, I guess.
Yep, and right now I said we're not enacting the TIF district. What we're doing is looking for the ability to create one at a future date. That once again, whether it's PNR, whether it's somebody else that comes in, and then at that point we would start a process over again and look at the merits of that potential development. Does this still fit within the city's comprehensive plan? Does this still meet the requirements of the TIF as well?
So Eric, I guess my question to start here would be, so I fully understand, why is it being brought forth together I guess the development district, starting there, that was kind of the first thing you explained. What is it currently? You mentioned kind of where it was. It didn't come in our packet, what the current development district currently is, because that's part of what we're voting on tonight, right? Is expanding that?
Is expansion of the district, that is correct. So if you look at this map on the screen right now, that Uggstead Road boundary on the west, that holds true with what's existing there today. Where you see the label of Highway 53, that essentially those two sections up there, that is currently not within that existing development district. If you look generally where it says Development District 1, actually you see Hermantown Road, Development District 1, that's plus or minus where Arrowhead Road is today. So right now that's the current boundaries of the development district. Is generally from Anderson Road going to the northerly property line associated with the city.
So currently the Ingwalls property does not fall within the district,
That is correct.
nor the property Uggstead 53 area.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And this development district expansion then is open and, I mean, it's encouraging more growth both along Highway 53 as well as the Ingles property.
That is right. We've had a discussion as a staff. Some cities, I mean, that was one of the discussion points, is why don't we disencumber the entire city? Some cities do that. And we said, no, we want to still preserve basically the rural character associated with Hermantown as it exists today. And generally, that's why we picked Uggstead Road as that dividing line for the district.
Okay.
Now, 20, 30, 50 years from now in the future, things change. Maybe this development district would have to be expanded, but at least right now, as we foresee that makes a logical western boundary associated with that. And it mirrors what's in place today.
So what the city's proposing today is districts 1 and 2. So the expansion, correct, which you just described for me, so I have an understanding. What is the second part the city's looking
So
for?
the second part is, Joe, if you want to scroll up a little, or scroll down, so we see that blue area in the detail area. So that would be the ability to create a TIF district associated with that particular parcel, that 26 acres right there. So what that does is it makes it, developers have another opportunity to look at this property, saying that there's some other potential sources of revenue to help pay for a development in there. Once again, as part of any TIF, it does have to meet certain thresholds, one being public benefit. So that's what the city looks at as well for, any applications coming forward, is how does this benefit the city? And at least in the case of a residential development, we have a need for residential housing within our city, both workforce housing and other housing in general. And so that meets one of the tenets associated with the comprehensive plan. And once again, the other being the protection of Keene Creek and our city trail that way. So by the clustering of any sort of development that way, not expanding fully within that 26 acre site, we have the ability to stay away from that creek, stay away from our trail system that we've built here in the past.
Okay, so then basically so part of this is the development district expanding. That's the first half of this. And then the TIF specifically for the greenhouse project
It's actually
is the second half.
It's the second thing is actually the ability to create one. We're not creating one as part of this action. Basically, planning and zoning is saying, yes, we agree that this expansion of a TIF district, the ability to create a TIF district in there meets with the comprehensive plan on those items that I spoke about.
So Eric, then if that site's created as a TIF district and a developer wants to come in and move ahead, which is what we would hope, does the city put any stipulations or requirements or guidelines on that then? To enable it to use the TIF
Well,
benefit?
That's what I was speaking a little bit before is the public benefit aspect of it. Is that we want to make sure that once again, that the requirements is that there's some sort of a public benefit associated with that. Whether it's the rebuild of Hermantown Road, whether it's the extension of public city utilities into that site, stormwater requirements, things like that, et cetera. So that's what we look at, those different things. It's not just a matter of 100% to a developer. Here you go, here's some cash.
Right.
So no,
Okay.
we're looking at there's a benefit that the city and the residents of our city will receive out of this development as well.
Good. Okay. That you helped me understand it. Thank you.
But before that is done, how do we know that it's truly going that? How is that placed, or how do we know sitting here today that will actually happen?
And that would be the next part when an application comes through with the CIDP. That there'd be development agreements in place that would be essentially reviewed and approved by the city council. But there's also, from your standpoint, looking at the CIDP, is this, once again, does this still meet the tenets of the comprehensive plan? Does this speak globally here? Is it a residential based development? Does it protect our natural environments? How does this work? How does it fit within that? And so that's what we'd look at a future date with the CIDP application.
And one other question then, has Hermantown done a TIF district before?
This would be our second. The first one that we did was in the Hermantown Marketplace and is associated with the Holiday Inn Express.
That's what I
And
thought.
in that case, same thing. There was a number of roads that were reconstructed or built in there, as well as some utilities that happened.
So, but in this district, the new expanded district, can anyone then come in and apply to have a TIF district put in, or is it?
It's not an open book sort of thing. You have to meet, and that's why, same thing. That's why we rely on a firm like LHB.
Mhm.
Let's say that, let's say I live next door to this in a different piece of property. And let's say I live at intersection of Maple Grove and LeBake. And they'd have to look at it. Is it a blighted site? Does it qualify as a redevelopment district? Yes or no? Are there other environmental issues, soil issues associated with it? Yes or no? Is there, the other one is a housing-based TIF district as well. Are there basically, you have a certain percentage of the units are either income restricted or different things that way. So there's different levels within the TIF that you can look at. And all those things would have to be answered one way or another to see if it qualifies. As I mentioned, particularly up on the Hermantown business, the former Arrowhead refinery site, it's a little bit in question. Does that qualify as a redevelopment? Because right now there's not many existing buildings on there. So that's in the process of LHB is looking at is there, I believe it's over 50 or 75% of the buildings, do they qualify as blighted buildings? If they don't, then it's not a redevelopment district. They look at other avenues to pursue. In that case, soils is a logical one, just given the history of what has happened on that property.
Mhm.
But generally, if you take a greenfield with nothing on it, I mean, if you're not going to build essentially income restricted housing on it, it's not going to be TIF qualified.
But as as market rate homes, you can still do a TIF district.
In this case, in this particular project or site, LHB has determined that there's blighted buildings on it, and that meets the requirements of the TIF laws and rules.
Would we have the opportunity, if this was represented, to have the existing development district clearly defined? And then what a development district actually is? Because isn't a commercial industrial development permit? Isn't that commercial in nature and not residential?
The CIDP is basically our all-encompassing that we look at for, now in the case of this property, it is now zoned commercial.
Yep.
And in this case, we looked at it from a commercial standpoint because it has the ability to have multifamily housing on it. Under the R3 district, what it was, the existing use honestly was a grandfathered non-conforming use, as walls. And then later on, it was basically a concrete block type company. So I mean, the uses in there didn't even meet our code or ordinance or any of those things.
Yep, I remember
So-
when that all came through.
Sure.
But within the development district itself, I wasn't able to find what that actually is. Like, what can you do in a development district?
So what that does is within the development district, it allows for any of those parcels within there to then further be qualified as a TIF district. And once again, it has to meet those requirements I just spoke about. Is it soils? Is it housing? Is it redevelopment? So same thing, if you pick a greenfield somewhere, more than likely it's not going to qualify for any of those things. So it just gives the ability, another tool in our toolbox for economic development within the city. But once again, it has to meet strict criteria to be able to become a TIF district.
I guess I guess it's not necessarily a concern in the sense that I would say that this couldn't be a TIF district, but we don't have the criteria of how this would be a TIF district specifically laid out, or what LHB has done or not done. And as part of the existing comprehensive plan, kind of like Valerie had mentioned, and I know it's in redevelopment and it's a process. I'm not sure that the development district expansion and a new opportunity for this specific TIF district necessarily does complement that. I think as a commercial property, it probably does under the new comprehensive plan, but not the existing. Would be a few of my kind of high level feelings. As well as it seems very specific towards PNR properties instead of just like anyone could apply for a TIF application. Specifically since all the information is already in the agenda package.
Exactly, I said it, and we're not looking for the fact that this is for PNR. Yes, PNR is people that have approached us and have been talking to us for over a year on this. But as I said, there's no application in place. They don't own the property at this point. But once again, creation of a TIF district allows another tool in the toolbox for economic development, whether it's for PNR or whether it's for somebody else in the future. In each case, it would have to be looked at in the individual merits. And once again, does what the applicant at that time is proposing, does it still meet the tenets of either the existing comp plan today or what we will have in the future in 2024?
So Corey and everyone else has pretty much answered any of my other questions or comments or stated them already. But my last thing is I feel this is more, personally, this is more of a city council decision, not as much as I love Hermantown, a decision that I would make. So.
I have a question. So this is not, I've got to get that clear. You're not asking for this to be a TIF district today.
Just want the ability to create a TIF district there.
If it meets all criteria. Okay, so it still could be turned down before it gets developed by someone who finally purchases it.
We'd have to go through the process again. It might, once again, you take away that potential tool right now, and it might not make the site as attractive.
If the site fail, if the developer fails in doing what they say, do they lose the credits then? Do they have to pay back the city?
There's a whole process that would go through, and that's why we engage companies like Ellers out of the Twin Cities to engage us with this. And there'll be a very lengthy document when that time comes, what's
But does
expected
it
and
get
what's
paid back to the city?
that I am not, one way or another, I don't have the answer for that.
Okay.
But there would be my understanding is there's safeguards for that. I've heard terms like clawback and different things. So that's why I said we rely on the expertise of Ellers as well as our city attorney who helps us in economic development matters.
So Eric, just help me understand this. So even though it's referencing these 260 apartments on that site that we have drawings of, we have pictures of, we've discussed in the past, you're saying that that property still is Celine's property then?
It's correct. It's still Celine's property right now. Now, for instance, if there was no, in the case of if there was no, if this is just a vacant site right now, we'd be having this discussion at a later date. But there's been enough activity going on from PNR with the city that staff believes this is a logical point now where we look at this for the ability to create a TIF district.
Okay, and the 26 single-family homes, that would be lumped in with
That's
the
included
200
within this envelope of that land area as well, yes.
Okay. It seems like that's a big step without a commitment, I guess, to me, but we obviously need the housing.
I was not aware single family housing could go into that. So that is something that can go into that,
As part of this development,
a TIF district.
that the whole 26 acres has been deemed for a redevelopment district.
Even if it's single family homes.
It's basically it's redevelopment. It's not
Okay.
a housing it's not a housing based TIF. It's a redevelopment based TIF.
Okay, good, thank you. Again, it's just surprising me. Okay.
But couldn't you redevelop anything in there then? It's commercial zoned.
It's commercial. It'd still have to go through a process that way. And at that point, it would have to be, once again, looked at the merits. Does this make sense for the TIF under that particular project that would be proposed at that time? Right now, the residential development that clusters units serves, once again, it meets requirements or meets the tenets of the comprehensive plan for housing, as well as that protection of Keene Creek and our trail that way. Let's say Lowe's comes in and looks at the site that way. We'd have to look at it a totally different way.
So if we were to approve this tonight, I get the first part, the development district, the TIF, then we'll have the ability So who's controlling or saying that it meets it or doesn't meet it, or what is that requirement?
Yes.
So, of like the TIF, like, so what would be next steps, I guess?
Really for the next step, then it basically works back to HEDA, the Economic Development Authority, as well as the city council. That there would have to be continued discussions.
So who would, I guess, define the criteria that it would be a yes or no for the TIF being available?
Right now, I said, if you say that this has the ability to be a TIF district, it can be a TIF district at that date. Once again, this allows PNR or some other developer, if they meet the criteria, that yes, this would become a TIF district then.
And then what would that criteria be?
It would be site specific. It would be specific to that particular project. Once again, it has to meet, at least from the city's eyes, what's the public benefit associated with it? We'd have to look at this thing from a global standpoint.
And then the city approves that?
It would go through a council and HEDA actions that way.
I'm normally not the chair, so I don't know. Can I call on Mr. Mulder? Is that okay? Mr. Mulder?
The last two pages of the packet are kind of a timeline of events. So just a couple of things. One, in regards to the development district. The development district is drawn along Uggstead Road and even includes sections 4 and 5 because we anticipate development happening there, and particularly potential for development with a TIF district on in that site. We've been in conversation with PNR about the possibility of a housing project at Ingwalds. But the development district fits the comprehensive plan because it follows the urban service area. It follows that area where we said there will be sewer. So we recommend that the development be done in our urban service area as opposed to that area that's outside the urban service area. So then in terms of how we drew the line to the development district, we followed the urban service line in the comprehensive plan. Two, this specific on the TIF district, it allows for housing, infrastructure, the trail, and protecting of Keene Creek. The business park, if it were to develop a TIF plan, and if it has to be, any work wants to be done there, it has to come back to you to be, does a TIF plan for a industrial park make sense here? But because we're not that far along with any discussions, that's not in front of you today. If at some point in time we want to look at a TIF district, that will come back to you. As far as whether it's a planning commission versus a city council decision, what you're recommending here is that this development plan and district meet is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and a redevelopment district for housing at the Ingwall site is consistent with the comprehensive plan to provide additional housing, infrastructure, and protecting the environment. Any plan for a TIF has to meet statutory requirements in terms of there's got to be a certain level of redevelopment if it's going to be a redevelopment district. There used to be one that was just simply for soils corrections. And in fact, so this is actually would be the third TIF district. Back in the early 90s, probably about 1993, when they did the Deerfield Homes, that was actually a TIF district. And that TIF district was then specifically for the corrections of soils because the soils were not suitable to build that level of housing on it. So there's specific, and each one of those TIF districts goes through a process. Does it meet statutory requirements? So requirements that somebody else sets other than the city. And then the city looks at it to say, does it fit our comp plan? Is it a development that we want? Does it meet the environment and the zoning approvals? And does it, and when we've looked at development and business subsidy and TIF and tax abatement, we always look at, it's like, who's getting the money and who's getting the benefit? And we always say, it's like, there's gotta be a public benefit beyond just the developer so that we get some trails, we get some road improvement. So when we did the TIF for the housing or the hotel, we wanted that blight removed. And so part of the deal was you got to tear down the old movie house that was partially standing. And we wanted some interior roads so that we required them to build that infrastructure so that we would be able to develop further down the line. But all of those things in terms of any TIF plan, it has to go through a process where it's got to get the permissions, whether it's a commercial industrial development permit or a special use permit or whatever it is in that district that comes here. And then the council goes through that process of identifying, does it meet statutory requirements? We have outside people help us identify that. And then does the TIF make sense? We don't do a TIF plan is if the increment isn't going to be enough to pay for the infrastructure. So they've got to build enough tax value so that it generates the taxes to pay the city back for that infrastructure. So there's a long process of once that TIF is approved, and all that work is done by the city council. Hopefully that answered some of those questions. Oh, one other question I was going to, what we're asking you to do is simply, you have to look at what is the existing comp plan. And granted, we all have ideas of what the future comp plan should be, but that's not the legal binding thing yet at this point. I mean, you really wouldn't want to say, it's like, well, but we don't want it there because this is what we want at some point in time. You need to think about that. But really what you're asking today is it consistent with the existing comp plan? And I'm suggesting to you that the development does because it meets the urban service area, and the Pacific District does because it's for residential that provides housing and protects the natural environment in terms of King Creek and the trail there.
I just have a question if I could.
Yeah.
So it's clear in my mind. So I understand this particular project, but let's just say Joe Schmo contractor comes in and he's going to put in 8 houses on a cul-de-sac. And in doing that, he's building that road. Would he? I mean, is there a size minimal for TIF districting, or could anybody apply for it if they could prove that they're having offsetting benefit?
Well, you've got to show that it's redevelopment, that there's a certain amount of blight there. You'd have to show that. You'd also have to show that the value of that the money works, that the increase in value generates enough tax to pay it back. So not every housing project is going to be qualified for a TIF project.
Okay.
Not every development will qualify for a TIF project. And there were simply some projects where it's like, no, we don't want a rendering plant at that location. Even if it's in the comprehensive plan, we still don't want it. We're not providing a TIF. We're not providing a business subsidy. Or we look at it and say, we might say, hey, that does generate some public benefit in terms of housing or jobs or economic tax base, and it fits into our plan. And we get something that we think benefits all of the residents in terms of infrastructure. And so similarly, it's a little bit different. When we did tax abatement for Fleet Farm, we said, if Fleet Farm were to fail, we still got the road built on Market Street to extend that so that anybody would benefit by being able to go back into that spot. If they were to fail, that road would be there, the infrastructure, the water would be there so that that building could continue to provide an economic benefit for the entire community. So that's what we look at. It's like, okay, if the business that is getting the subsidy, is getting the tax increment financing fails, does the city still get a benefit? And that's how we look at it. Like, if that's true, then we're more likely to proceed.
So the value add of this, if PNR develops, is that the housing, obviously very much needed. So I really like that. Trail access, that's a very nice addition, something if someone else came in, they wouldn't have to do. So I completely understand that. I guess, so the other things they're doing, you mentioned, is a road north to south. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so basically they could elect not to put a road through and just have an entrance into their property. Correct? Am I understanding that if they weren't going for TIF,
Right.
This is something you guys are requiring
Right.
a road through. And then protecting the environment was another thing you alluded to. Are there a couple other?
Yeah, so the infrastructure is improved Hermantown Road, the internal road connecting Hermantown Road to Anderson to serve those property there. There's some water main connections, some water main extensions, again, to serve those properties. So if the project fails, we'd still have those water mains. It protects King Creek. It provides what we talked about is a trailhead as part of their development. So that, because right now, you want to walk on that trail and you go park at Ingwall's, you're parking on private property. You really don't have permission to do that. Technically, you should not be doing that. Nobody's complaining, as far as I know, but it's like technically that's private property. But what, as part of this one is we say there needs to be a trailhead there. We want X number of parking spots. And we've even talked about the potential for a gazebo or something like that. So to make it a starting point or a drop off point for the trail.
And actually, if I could add, just from the environmental standpoint as well, as we've had discussions and basically direction from the DNR for a number of years now, there's a pond located on the Ingwall's property. That's actually King Creek that runs through the middle of that. The DNR has been after Ingwall's and after ourselves to essentially call what's taking that pond offline. So as part of this development as well, in part of the TIF, it would be essentially the rerouting or the recreation of King Creek in that area and having a separate stormwater pond. So that meets the basically what the DNR wants to see as far as fish habitat, et cetera, because King Creek is a trout stream. And so by able to do these improvements to that pond, taking it offline, reestablishing King Creek, it helps continue with that environmental.
I would suggest in the future, if this comes up again, I'm glad I'm not the only one, obviously here tonight to have the questions. If we were given more of a criteria of what they're looking for and why, or not, I mean, just the basics of what you said, and I appreciate that. In preparing the rest of this information, I felt very blinded and I actually understand quite a bit of this myself because of what I do, but it was very telling us what we're going to say and then without any information to be able to make a decision. So this has helped. Thank you. But I wish I could have had that ahead of time.
And Eric, I'm confused with the agenda. It says review of tax increment finance district. It doesn't talk about any kind of actions necessary.
The actions in the actual then underneath agenda item 5C. I happen to agree with Beth because to be honest, this was rezoned commercial because PNR properties had information on what they were going to do with an apartment. And then now it's going to be made into a TIF district because there's a bunch of information on what PNR properties is going to do. And PNR properties doesn't even own the land. It really seems like we're just doing this for PNR properties, to be honest. That's just my
I agree.
I agree
opinion.
as well.
And I don't want that to be the takeaway because I'm not opposed to not doing a TIF here or expanding the development district. I don't want it to make it seem like we're just doing everything the developer wants. We're rezoning it for them. We're creating a TIF district and then they can just do whatever they want.
We're not being aware of all of the criteria and the.
Yeah, like
additions, so
John's
the
information was
we
very
are the
helpful.
ones
Even
that
a lot of
make-
the information you said or what LHB has as criteria. I tried looking up a lot of this stuff because I didn't know what it was and I didn't find a lot of that information.
I would say,
So that being said, so this is only the second time there's ever been a request from a developer for a TIF?
So I tell this story. So back in 2012, we were having a work session with the city council. Some of the city council members will just say, we're more conservative than others. And I thought maybe TIF might be a 4-letter word. And I was prepared to duck under the table. And because if I said, should we do a TIF district, not, I'm just jokingly, right? But it's like, we had never done, so we had done the TIF for the Deerfield back in the early 90s and had never done anything since. And our position had always kind of been is if you want to develop, you bear the cost, you build the infrastructure, you do that. But as we in about 2012, we started talking like, if somebody comes to the door at a development that we really would like to see happen. And at that point in time, there was talk about the big boxes. One of them that, I mean, I don't know if this is, at one time there was talk about Cabela's. At one time there was talk about, and at Fleet Farm, I talked about TIF several different times. And we were said like, are we prepared to do that? And at that point in time, we didn't even have a business subsidy policy. So we had to create, in order to do TIF, you have to have a business subsidy policy. And at that point in time, the city council said, we're not worried about housing. Housing is going to happen. The market will take care of that. But there might be some commercial development that we'd like to see that we're willing to do a business subsidy for. So we wrote the business policy to say that said housing was excluded. About 2-3 years ago, as housing became a real issue, we said we maybe need to rethink that and say we might be willing to provide housing if under certain circumstances. But so yeah, it hasn't happened very often. We generally don't get approached by developers all that often. We have seen that happen more frequently in the last 4 years because of just the nature of because what we're seeing now is we're really talking about a lot more about redevelopment. It's a site, there's a site that needs to be corrected before you can develop it, as opposed to, wow, just barren land that nobody's ever touched. And, we can just put in all the infrastructure and it's not going to be hard at all. But now with some of the redevelopment, it's like you got to make some site corrections. And so the developers are asking about that more often. But again, in 14 years I've been here, this is maybe the 3rd or 4th where we've actually done any serious talking about it. And we've done some of it differently because we also did tax abatement for Fleet Farm. We wanted that development. We wanted to see that develop. We wanted to see the marketplace develop. We did some tax abatement for that spot, but we didn't for St. Luke's across the street. We haven't done any tax abatement with Joe Peterson, and I'll talk about Joe Peterson since he's not here, with any of the stuff that's being happening in the marketplace. We haven't done any tax TIF on that project. Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It kind of depends upon the case-by-case basis.
So if this went forward and for whatever reason, the current developer that's interested in this property changes their mind and
They walk away.
Yeah. Now it's in place though. So any developer could come in and make a 100-unit apartment rather than 260. And they would qualify then because it's on the same property, right?
No, each project would have to be done specific to that project.
So it would have to come in and build 260
No.
apartments and.
Even let's just say P&R walks away
Mhm.
and somebody else picks up P&R plant and John Mulder picks up P&R plant and says, I want to do TIF. I still got to go through a process where the city council has to approve all that. It's not a done deal that way.
I think some of the confusion too is that P&R is not applying for a TIF right now, correct?
P&R has.
This is
P&R
just a
has-
future possibility to create a
P&R has
TIF at this
inquired about-
specific spot with this specific plan.
P&R has asked for TIF, but they don't have an application for us. So it's
Right.
like, so we're kind of in this spot where it's like, we can't give you TIF, you don't have an application. But we're not doing an application until we have some sense of where we're at with the TIF.
So we're being asked just for the availability.
Yes.
With the specific information that hasn't been asked for yet.
Does that,
That's just what I don't feel comfortable doing. So that's,
well, and the question is, we just don't want to do whatever the developer wants. Well, it kind of depends whether or not you want what the developer is developing.
but they're not a developer yet because they don't own the land.
Yeah, technically they don't own the land.
They get pretty pictures.
So with the TIF stuff, and this I'm sure is kind of new to you guys because you haven't done it. So I guess thank you for sitting down and trying to figure this out. And I think that's what we're really trying to do here today. As yeah, you said, you know, or was it you? I forget, but not coming in, I had to make a call. I think it was the first time ever that I've made a call before a planning and zoning meeting to like, what is the ask tonight? So I can come prepared. And so I definitely think we've been well educated tonight, which has been helpful. And so just so I kind of have a full understanding then, so like the redevelopment, that's a criteria TIF. And, you know, because we're tearing down existing buildings and putting up new ones, right? And I kind of disagree with that, just because if you're going to go in there and build, you're going to tear down existing. The comprehensive plan, that makes 100% sense of why we would do this from a TIF perspective. Housing, 100%, you know, right now, I think we all can agree there's a housing shortage, and for the city to step in and say, hey, let's solve this, I think is awesome. So I can completely be on board with that. The trail access, I think is another nice thing. The road improvement, I don't know here nor there from, you know, kind of my perspective. I don't know getting from, you know, Hermantown to whatever the other road is there, cutting through the middle, if there's much value add to the public, in my opinion, but maybe there is. Protecting the environment, I'm sure you guys would require that no matter who went in there and did anything. So, but you know, the water mains, if I'm understanding it correctly, you know, and their P&R in this case is going to run extra so that, you know, there could be 26 single family homes. I think that's a huge value add in the future, in my opinion. You know, if I'm developing a project and I have to put in that extra infrastructure, normally I would never incur that cost, but there again, I think it gets back to that underlying, you know, reasoning of adding housing to Hermantown. So I guess, is there anything else that why this property would qualify for TIF, just so I can have a full understanding, or did I kind of touch base on everything? And then I guess this diagram, kind of tough to see. I don't know if we can pull that one up. So with the roadways, restructuring the existing road, is that something that would be with this project that they would be, is all that accurate, or is this hypothetical, I guess would be an easy way of.
That's the current, that's the thinking by the city, is that this is the infrastructure.
They're gonna,
240, 260 unit apartments there. This is the infrastructure we want to see happen.
okay, so a new road, add a new city street, and then that water main, which there again, I think that's huge for the, you know, future, and putting in more homes and things of that nature. The roadway there again, I don't know how that is a huge value add, but you guys have studied this. And I guess, yeah, the rest of this stuff I think we've already covered. So, but no, I guess thank you for your work on this. It's a lot. I think, you know, we've been well educated tonight, and I think moving forward for something like this, I don't know, because I know it has to be formal. You guys have to, if we're all together, I just, yeah, to be educated on this it's the first time I've ever seen it and studied it, and it's been a learning curve.
And again, I think we learned lessons on this process as well, just because again, we do this once every 10 years, and so we're still kind of learning some of that process as well. And the next time we do it 10 years from now, it'll probably be a little bit different, and then we'll probably make a different mistake.
So
Yes, and certainly appreciate you being available to answer questions.
So you are asking us to accept the pre-written letter here, then at the end, stating that as a planning commission, we adopt the facts and conclusions set forth in the staff report that was read, not written, and based thereon finds the development plan and the TIF plan conform to the general plans for development and redevelopment of the city as described in adopted 2001 City of Hermantown Comprehensive Plan Update. That is my last sticking point. All I could say is we're having to put our faith and trust in you guys without having anything written that we have an actual plan or anything to read or say that we agree with, other than what you told us.
And in the packet, we talked about, like, this is the development plan. And that it would be a housing unit of 240 units, 26 single family at this location. Who would redevelop it?
Again, for a non-owner, but okay. Anybody else has to come back. Okay.
And in turn, if another developer comes in, we would give them the same courtesy of providing the TIF for them, just like we would this developer.
And we would look at, it'd be.
I guess I'm still hung up though. There's not a developer here applying for a TIF. So we keep talking about it, but that's not even the action item.
Yeah.
I agree with Beth. I don't agree with the action item as stated.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate to say no or to ask the city to revise and revise and resubmit or something along those lines instead.
Table it for tonight and,
Not necessarily table it because this goes to nowhere land, but
yeah, I know.
So I guess, well, yeah, I guess there's a discussion, or I think I have to call for a motion. Is that what we established, even though it is stated as review? Are we looking for a motion tonight?
If we're looking for a motion and to act on this resolution, that's part of the packet right here.
Did you read that?
Obviously, if it's tabled, we would come back to the August 15th meeting. And I guess if there's table, I'd look for some questions or rationale from P and Z. What's the information that you still need clarification on? So it gives staff some direction on the homework, what we need to do. Let's say it is denied. This has the ability still to be essentially relooked at by city council and potentially acted on by them as well. Those are really kind of the two courses, or if it's, approved this evening, then it continues on the pathway that it's kind of identified in the schedule here as part of the packet.
Or if it's a minor tweak, maybe. There could be a
Well,
motion with a
Consider it.
minor tweaking, and I'm not sure what that might be, but that might be another way. I don't remember.
is it possible to say no, but request it to be re-reviewed and resubmitted?
I'd say you table then, rather than outright deny.
Are you allowed to take an agenda item and redo it if it's tabled?
Are you able to do it?
So, yeah, maybe what makes sense is, I think a few of us have really voiced our opinion. We could just rifle down the line, and then from there, I guess decide on how we want to move forward. So we can offer direction. And so I guess to start, yeah, I guess I really like the idea of the TIF district personally. There's certain things I don't agree with, or I don't find a lot of value add, but there's certainly a ton of things. The redevelopment, the comprehensive plan, the housing, the trails, the water mains, the road infrastructure, things of that I think are a great value add and make a lot of sense for this to be a TIF district. I guess that would be my initial thoughts. I know everyone has kind of had different thoughts. Do you want to continue on down the line? I think you've brought some great points up, and maybe summarize them so then we can figure out what direction we want to go.
I guess I'm looking for specifically what the existing development district 1 is, where it's being expanded. And then if you're looking for a motion to be allowed to create a TIF district within development district 1, it would have to be very specific on what counts as a TIF. What would be approved? What would those criteria be? Because you're really asking to create a, you know, tax
So
increment
what-
financing on anyone in this zone could request that. But then what does that specifically entail, which is not in the agenda packet tonight?
So what count, so okay. The criteria for TIF.
So if you can create a TIF district within Development District 1, and that's what we're making a motion on to be allowed to do that. And that application would have to come forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. What specific criteria needs to be met in order to create a TIF district?
I can take a start on that right now. So as Mr. Mulder did reference that there needs to be a public benefit. And
And
the gist of it is the math's got to work.
Well, and so to respect everyone's time, I agree, kind of like Beth said, that it's been said a lot of times, but it's not specifically in here. So if we were to say, yep, you could make a TIF district within Development District 1, there's no specifics on what that is. So if someone came back and said, why would you approve that? I would just say, well, Eric and John said a lot of really good things.
Well, specifically on what we're before us this evening, this 26 acres is Mr. Mulder said that, yes, it was identified that 260 units of single family homes, creation of infrastructure, creation of roads, basically rerouting a pond, water quality, et cetera, those things.
Yeah.
Those are basically the requirements of a development, you know, in a specific TIF district if this happens.
So I would
So-
prefer that instead of a development plan that's not an agenda item as justification, because it sounds like we're approving this plan as it's in the packet today. Yeah, but not in the packet, you're not asking that, you're asking it verbally,
Yeah,
is my concern.
in the packet, it says to review and consider. Doesn't say to vote on,
Well, as Beth said in the letter, we're
yeah.
specifically saying that this follows the comprehensive plan and a number of other things.
That letter that we're signing is the issue.
And so I don't want to reject it because people have spent a lot of time and money on this and effort, the city, us sitting here tonight. My time's valuable. I just don't want to reject it, but I'm not going to approve it as it is right now, I guess. Even if that meant abstaining, because I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, the way this is written here, it says to review plan modification and consider a resolution affirming. It doesn't say we're yay or naying it, we're reviewing it and considering it.
But towards the bottom, there's a letter that's drafted from the city that says what we're specifically.
Pass that.
Okay, I'm at the very bottom, this
Approved. So-
Ehlers. Okay, that's before this then. Oh, adopts the facts and conclusions, okay.
Well, I like what I see and I'd like to consider moving this forward since it's just the availability is what we're looking at. And I don't know that we're so wrapped up that it's P&R and this is being said and done because it's not, they don't own it. And that deal could not possibly even go through. And we're looking at being able to say, this is good for that area, for whoever it is to bring it in. Am my understanding right? It's different in size. It's not always going to be exactly the same that if there's not 260 units, that the requirements may be different for the next developer that brings in 180, whatever it is. So I like what I see here.
I think that's the redeeming thing. You've had a lot more, the staff has had a lot more time to talk this over, and I apologize because we're getting this blindsided, but as long as if we approve that a TIF district can be allowed in this area today, as long as all criteria is met, and as long as no changes of instead of 200 plus, there's now 180 because the whole process was we're not going to build if we don't get commercial. Now we're not going to build unless, that's difficult. That's difficult to be held with a gun to our head. So I would rather say anyone who meets whatever criteria has the benefits that any developer could have a TIF district in this area. And hopefully then it's opening the door for other areas and other developments. Then as long as criteria is met and feet are held to the fire, then it is a good thing for our community.
I agree.
I agree with that because there is more. I just wish, not beating a dead horse, we would have had more. But if you're asking us to base it on this, that we see in that packet, I would say as long as those items in the packet are formed and done, it makes sense. If there are changes to those because financially they're going backwards, then I think there should be somewhere that we can pull that back out, is my only thing. Otherwise, I think it's good for our community in a lot of ways to have these. It really does bring in more developers. Hermantown has been very notorious not to ever recognize any of this. And we have had difficulty for this. So I'm excited, but I'm still hesitant. But if we're going to do this one, then I want some teeth to it and to lay it on your shoulders, sir, that it's held to what they're asking for.
And that's why we engage companies like Ellers, because let's say PNR or somebody comes back and says, I'm going to look at 140 units. They'd run the numbers and say, does this work? Does it not work? Once again, as I said, you get back to the math,
Right.
because at the end of the day, the city needs to have public benefits. We've identified what those public benefits are.
So John
And
had
if
mentioned that too, that financially it has to work, but even that would be really helpful to have like in the report saying that we crunched the numbers and this would financially benefit the city. And not necessarily for this specific property or any parcel within Development District 1 that meets these criterias. And the findings of fact are, here's all the boxes it checks, here's how it financially makes sense for the city. And then you make a motion, that would be fine.
As we do for PUD.
Right.
You
Similar.
sit there and say, check, 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 check. And then we all go, okay, this is good. You've done that.
Isn't that what Minnesota statute section 469 says?
We don't have that statute for to see it.
No, but you should rely on the city staff to say,
That's what
Then I would say it should be a
That's
city
okay.
council decision,
we
not
are,
planning.
we are trusting them.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
There's no development agreement in the agenda item tonight.
Yes. Yes.
To provide housing, protect the environment, and with these different other things. That's why I come trying to typically the numbers. You're gonna do that. In order to get that, you have to do that. That is the topic.
Good.
But the planning is like, is it consistent? The development is different, this is the government plan, this is the whole 1.2 cents. Provide housing, redevelopment, or business that consistent. That's why it comes here. You're absolutely right. Do the numbers front, and the make financial sense to the city. That's the topic. In the same way, you approve a fact where they make the sense that this number will lay us out. You approve that. Then we have a development agreement with them. Not even providing you something. But we're developing this school that is council that okay, you have to do all this work and meet this requirement and meet this requirement. And you're gonna put up 125% of the cost of the project. If the local actually redevelop, that development will be included in the contract. In the same way, you approve facts, and then the development agreement on how that fact is developed, done with the cost. Here, you approve that this is consistent with the plan, and then the city council was a development agreement saying you shall build 260 units, not do a big hotel, or anything else. In order to get this, you shall do the infrastructure in order to get this. In order to get this, you have to do X number of dollars and, you fail to do that, then you don't get that money. So that part of it, the city council has to do that work.
So
But here, do we go back to the time of this, well, why would it be happening? Why would it be? It's about the planning process.
my question to that would be, is we're giving the availability and trusting the city council that they're going to see the numbers and they're going to decide what works based on the size of the project. In the event that it did not go through, does the city council have the ability to just approve it anyways and pass it as a TIF, knowing the numbers, if it was turned down from here?
It's turned out here.
Yes.
You know, I don't know that. So, is it consistent with how?
Okay.
So that's the question. So that's the recommendation.
Yep.
Any other additional thoughts or comments? Okay. Well, then I look for a motion on agenda item 5C.
Someone's with a motion on 5C to approve as stated with the one resolution covering the two items.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, so 1, 2. So 4 in favor, 1 opposed. So the motion passes. All right, moving on to agenda item 6, continuing business. Eric, any
No, there's none.
new business?
There's none.
8, communications.
None either.
All right,
That's a quick part of the meeting here.
yes. Number 9, commission member reports. Myself, no report. Commissioner Olet,
No report.
Commissioner Clark,
No report.
Commissioner Winslow, Commissioner Simmons.
No report.
All right. Counselor Geisler.
My mother's 87 years old. I told her I'd be there by 8 o'clock, so I'm know she's gonna be counting up minutes, so I gotta be quick. Couple meetings ago, we talked about looking for a utility and infrastructure director. Well, this so happens that the city hired that position, and she's sitting in the back of the room there.
Ah,
First we
welcome.
go as a landscape architect. She worked for JPJ. She was here representing the other client, but starting next Monday, I believe, sure she's gonna be a city employee, so. Other than that, maybe Joe can give a 2-second recap on the activities that's gonna happen with part of Summerfest and community engagement and that type of thing.
Well, the next 2 days, there'll be a lot of opportunities for folks to engage in the comprehensive plan, pre-good, and be involved in, survey, and what will be interactive map. Out in the public, so we've got time tomorrow for the chamber, then move your floats and doing centricity launch. To be able to pull in everybody from there, we'll have time after the chamber hours, and that's focused on business. We've got a meeting after that with, specific. Advisory committee, a few people from the chamber, then on Thursday, we'll have some time at Skyline, pitching families, specific around, what they see and vision they want to Hermantown look like, and we will have 2 different tables set up at, Hermantown block party. So a ton of different opportunities to from a lot of different things. And so you start to kind of see some of that, we're actually, we went a lot of different activity, a lot. It's driving different uses.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Winslow second.
All in favor?
I-
Aye.